The smell of sweet tea and betrayal hung thick in the air of the community hall the moment Aunt Brenda looked at my belly and decided my life was over. I sat at a round table, the paper plate of cake untouched in front of me, pretending to read a card. My hands shook, not from the heavy gifts, but from the weight of knowing. I was 7 months pregnant, wearing a smile that felt like old, tight elastic. My boyfriend Marcus was across the room, laughing too loud with his cousins, selling me out with every fake chuckle. The light streaming through the cheap vinyl banners made the dust motes dance, and it felt like I was watching my life end in a bad movie, soundtracked by fake congratulations and the clinking of plasticware. I watched him throw his head back, a picture of carefree belonging, and I realized how desperately I had wanted to belong to his world, too. Aunt Brenda, the family queen, the gatekeeper of Marcus's name and money, drifted toward me. She was dressed in stiff lace, her face set hard like old marble. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask about the baby's name. She didn't offer a single polite inquiry about my health. She merely surveyed my body with a look of cold, surgical disdain. "You look tired, dear," she started, but the words were a flimsy mask. "You know, Marcus's bloodline is very specific. We have a certain look, certain features that define our heritage and our standing. It's a delicate balance." She leaned in close, her expensive perfume choking me, a sickening, sweet floral scent. Her voice was not a shout, but a slow, cold hiss that only I could hear above the joyous chatter. "We'll never accept a child that looks like that." The air left my chest. That single sentence, simple and cruel, was the threat. It wasn't about the now, it was about a future they intended to block. It was the judgment that echoed everything the family whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. They had seen pictures of me as a baby, had studied my strong nose, my father's deep-set eyes, and they had decided the child I carried was a curse. I saw the memory flash in Aunt Brenda's eyes, a ghost of a man from their past, a shame the family had buried decades ago. They believed my child, my innocent little girl, would somehow be the physical proof of that old sin. She would look like the wrong kind of man, the one who stole their peace, and crucially, their money. She wasn't just my baby, she was a terrifying biological prophecy. I looked across the hall at Marcus. He was my protector, my love, the father of my child. He was supposed to be my shield. I held my breath, waiting for him to step up, to defend me, to make a scene. But he only glanced over, caught his aunt's hard stare, and then looked away, back to his laughing cousins. He reached for a soda, his shoulders visibly slumping in submission. That look, that simple turning of his head. It was the moment I knew. The fight was rigged. The battle for my family's acceptance was lost before it began. Marcus chose his blood, and in that moment, he bled me dry. My love for him didn't vanish, but my respect for his character withered instantly. I took a slow, deep breath, just like the story I love, the one where the heroine keeps her composure. I put down the gift card. I let the pain squeeze my throat and then I let it go. My face stayed perfectly still, a mask of total devastating calm. I looked Aunt Brenda right in her cold eyes and gave her the one reaction she didn't expect. All right. No tears, no shouting, no begging for Marcus to defend me, just 2 words of quiet acceptance, delivered like a verdict. All right. It meant, "You have made your position clear, and I have heard you. The consequences are now my own." Aunt Brenda's face twitched, an almost imperceptible ripple of confusion. She had prepared for drama, for tears, for a scene that would confirm her power. She hadn't prepared for surrender that felt like a quiet yet terrifying threat. She stumbled backward a step, hesitated, and then walked away, confused by my silence. That night, I moved. I called a locksmith to change the cylinder on my old apartment's door, paying extra for the late-night service. Marcus came home late to our shared apartment, still smelling of party punch and cheap victory. He stumbled into the bedroom, oblivious. He didn't notice the 2 suitcases I had already packed and put in my car: the essentials, the documents, my grandmother's locket. He didn't notice the note I left on the kitchen counter, just 2 words: I'm gone. No explanation, no drama, just a full stop. When he woke up, I was already across the city, the key to the old, tiny apartment I had kept quiet and never let go of, feeling heavy and cold in my hand. That apartment was my lifeboat. I sat on the old, worn couch, the anger finally roaring, but now it was a focused, cold flame. I was done fighting a war they had already rigged. I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because I was terrified of what they knew and what they might do. The fear in Aunt Brenda's eyes was too big for just a family fight about appearance. It was a dark, old secret that tied my child to a perceived financial crime. What did my innocent baby's face remind them of that was so evil, so unforgivable? I didn't know yet, but I knew that I had to build a wall of safety around myself and my child before the truth came out. This was not just about me anymore. This was about survival. I knew the only way to win was to become untouchable, financially and legally isolated from their toxicity. The next few weeks were a heavy silence. Marcus called 20 times the first day, 10 the second, then none. His absence was a heavy stone in my gut, a sharp, constant pain, but it was also clean. It forced me to face the truth. I was now a single mother, and my independence was the only inheritance my daughter would have. There would be no bailouts, no apologies, only the hard work of self-creation. My plan began. Quietly, strategically. The betrayal had burned away all the softness in me, leaving only steel. I worked 2 jobs from my apartment, one writing ad copy for a small company, the other doing transcription overnight. I ignored the constant, dull ache in my back and the growing tightness of my stomach. Every late night, every headache, every skipped meal was channeled into one goal: building a fortress of numbers. Every dollar saved was a brick in that wall. I tracked every penny. Rent was paid 3 months in advance, giving me a cushion. The baby's nursery was set up with only necessities: a used crib, a safe car seat, and stacks of hand-me-down clothes, all paid for in cash. No debt, no credit, no vulnerability. I changed my cell phone number and my primary bank account to a different institution across town. I cut all the threads that tied me to Marcus's world. The stealth independent strategy was in full effect. I was becoming financially and geographically invisible to them. I read books on single motherhood, not for comfort, but for strategy. I studied the laws on parental rights, understanding custody precedents and visitation rights. I made sure every document, every bill, every piece of mail was solely in my name, filed and organized. I knew they were powerful, and I would not allow them one single legal loophole to pull me back into their toxic orbit or challenge my fitness as a mother. I was preparing not just for motherhood, but for a legal defense. The mystery of Aunt Brenda's whisper grew larger with the baby. I would sit by the window, watching the streetlights flick on, and wonder, who did my baby look like? What kind of history could cause such deep, physical fear? It was an obsession that fueled my work. I started doing my own deep dive research into Marcus's maternal line, looking for old news stories, anything that hinted at a scandal. Then, one cold, gray afternoon in the 8th month, a strange thing happened. I was struggling to zip up my boots when the mail slot clattered. A certified letter arrived. It wasn't from Marcus. It was from Lockhart, Vance and Associates, a very old, very expensive downtown law firm I had never heard of, the kind of firm that only rich families use to bury their scandals. My heart pounded a drumbeat against my ribs. I sat at my table, turning the envelope over and over, the paper heavy and thick, embossed with an intimidating crest. I finally tore it open. Inside, there was no threat of a lawsuit. There was only a single, typed page, printed on bond paper with no name signed, an anonymous disclosure. The page described a family history. Not Marcus's family directly, but his mother's line. A devastating story of deep shame and a disastrous financial crash decades ago. It talked about a secret relative, Marcus's mother's disgraced older brother, Elias, who had betrayed the family, running off with a massive chunk of the family's wealth and destroying their reputation in a high-profile white-collar crime. The paper explained that this disgraced man, Elias, this phantom relative, was known for a very rare physical trait, a specific, sharp curve to his lower earlobe and a unique butterfly-shaped mole on the left side of his neck. He was said to have sworn vengeance, promising to one day return through a descendant to reclaim what he felt was stolen from him by the family. The final sentence of the unsigned letter was the true shock, explaining Aunt Brenda's panic. Aunt Brenda did not fear your race or your family. She feared the ghost of her own brother, Elias, who swore to return and take back what was stolen, and whom she believed would be physically manifested in your child. Your strong features simply reminded her of old Elias's own prominent features. My baby was not a curse because of me, or my race, or my family. My baby was a threat because they feared she was a reincarnation of their worst, most expensive enemy. The sheer ridiculousness of the superstition was astounding. The fear melted away, replaced by a cold, burning pride. My daughter would not be a ghost. She would be free. I crumpled the letter, threw it away, and doubled down on my plan. They had rejected my child based on a ridiculous, baseless, superstitious fear. I would make them regret it with my success, not by fighting them, but by outliving them. The day came suddenly, with a sharp, unexpected pain that brought all my months of work to a sudden stop. I drove myself to the hospital, alone but not afraid. I had planned this moment down to the last detail. I had my bag, my birth plan, and my dignity. My primary nurse, an older woman named Joan, was kind but didn't pry into my solitude. I lay in the delivery room, focusing on Joan's calm voice. I thought about the whispers, the rejection, and the dark, silly secret of the earlobe and the mole. The pain was real, but the fear was gone. I was bringing life into the world, and that was the only truth that mattered. And then, she arrived. My beautiful, perfect daughter, whom I named Hope. She was soft and small, and when they laid her on my chest, the entire world stopped. I counted her toes. I gently checked her earlobes and the side of her neck. No strange curves, no moles, just a whole, new, clean beginning, utterly free from the ghosts of their past. 3 hours later, as I was holding Hope, learning her face, the quiet was broken by a frantic sound outside my door. It was Marcus. He shoved past the nurse, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes red and raw with sleeplessness and desperation. He hadn't just disappeared. He looked like he'd been chased through the city for weeks. He walked to the edge of my bed, reaching out for my hand, tears thick in his voice. I couldn't call. I couldn't risk it. This wasn't the weak boy from the baby shower. This was a man broken, but still prioritizing his explanation over my well-being. He didn't speak the words clearly, but his face and his terror screamed the truth. I never wanted to leave you. I was forced. As I looked at him, I suddenly saw the pieces click together, fitting the expensive law firm and Aunt Brenda's power into place. Marcus didn't leave because he was weak. He left because Aunt Brenda had threatened to frame him for serious insider trading and corporate fraud, using manipulated internal emails from his workplace. He had been blackmailed, his entire career, his reputation, and his freedom used as the price for my immediate isolation until the baby was born and proven safe, meaning that didn't have the phantom earlobe. The realization brought a rush of strange pity, but not forgiveness. I was protecting you, he pleaded, his voice cracking. If I was arrested, you'd be alone anyway, and broke. I looked down at Hope, nestled in my arm. He had prioritized his career over my safety and my heart. He had chosen to be silent and broken me instead of standing up and risking everything with me. I didn't let him touch me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say a word to debate his choices. I just slowly shook my head, my eyes telling him, "Too late. The window is closed. You had a choice, and you chose yourself." He slumped, realizing my wall was too high, too strong. He understood finally that he had lost everything that mattered, me and his daughter, by trying to save something that was ultimately meaningless, his image in his family's eyes. He walked out, his steps heavy with regret, and disappeared back into the storm he had created. I closed my eyes and whispered to Hope, "We are free of him." But freedom, I learned, is often expensive, and the family wasn't done paying the price for their cruelty. The next morning, the nurses had just finished checking Hope when the noise started. A loud, desperate pleading from the hallway. Aunt Brenda burst through the door. She was wearing a coat over her pajamas. Her face was bare, her hair was wild, and the marble hardness was gone, replaced by profound terror. She was frantic, broken, and looked like a woman who had just seen the end of the world. She staggered toward my bed, ignoring the nurse's protests. She didn't look at my face. She didn't look at Hope's face. She only looked at the baby's tiny bandaged heel where the nurses had done the standard newborn heel prick test. Her obsession was clearly fixed on the baby's blood, not her features. She walked to the edge of the bedside, a terrible, low, begging sound coming from her throat. She gripped the railing of the bed, her knuckles white. She had come for the baby, yes, but not for the reason I thought. Aunt Brenda started to speak, but the words were a desperate, broken rush, tangled by sobs. "Chloe. Please. It's Chloe." Her sister Chloe, the one Marcus loved most, the one who was truly kind and the only one who had ever sent me a polite text, was dying. She had been secretly battling a rare, aggressive form of blood disease for months. They had flown her to 4 different countries, spent millions, and exhausted every private donor registry. The family's money, their influence, their power. It was all useless against her diagnosis. Chloe needed a life-saving stem cell transplant immediately. They had tested the entire immediate family, including Marcus, in secret. None were a match. They were running out of time. Aunt Brenda hadn't been afraid that my baby would look like an old enemy. She had been terrified that the baby would be the wrong match, that my daughter's heritage, the one she cursed, would somehow make her incompatible. And Chloe would die because of her own family's rigid, hateful rules. The reason she was begging, the reason she was crying so hard that tears cut paths through the dust on her cheeks, was the unimaginable, poetic cruelty of fate. The hospital's computer system had automatically cross-referenced the newborn blood samples against all active patients in need of rare tissue matches. It was standard protocol, a silent, bureaucratic miracle. The nurses had received the internal memo less than an hour ago. My daughter, the child they rejected, the child they feared would be the ghost of their shame, was the one person in the entire city, possibly the region, with the perfect, rare, 100% blood match to save Marcus's dying sister Chloe. I was silent, reeling from the magnitude of the revelation. I looked at the frantic woman, then down at Hope. My daughter was not a curse. She was a miracle, delivered to them on terms they could never have dictated. Aunt Brenda reached out not to touch the baby but to grip my forearm. Her grip was tight, desperate, devoid of the old superiority. She was begging for me to sign the consent forms for the rare tissue donation, begging for the blood of the child they rejected to save the life of the child they loved. The irony was thick enough to choke on. They needed the child they said they would never accept. I looked at the desperate, broken face of the woman who had tried to ruin me. I looked at the silence where Marcus should have been. I thought of Chloe, the one kind soul in that cold, cruel family who was an innocent victim of their power games. I looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the impossible moral choice hanging in the air. Did I choose cold, perfect revenge, or compassionate, dignified freedom? The choice was not easy. The anger was a roaring fire inside me, a seductive voice that whispered, "Make them suffer the way they made you suffer." To say no would be the perfect cold revenge. To deny them the only thing that could save their beloved Chloe would be the complete, final victory, the ultimate settlement of their debt. But I looked at Hope. My daughter was not revenge. Hope was a clean slate. Hope was freedom. I refused to let their toxicity, their hate, or their fear taint the foundation of my daughter's life. I would not teach my child that life was about settling old scores. I would teach her that life was about building new bridges, and that my power was defined by my mercy, not my cruelty. I signed the consent forms, not for Aunt Brenda, not for Marcus, but for Chloe, the kind one, the innocent victim of their own toxic history, and, most importantly, for myself, so I could walk away clean and truly free, unburdened by the weight of their potential death on my conscience. The procedure was done quickly and successfully. Chloe was saved. The family's silence was deafening, heavier than any shout. They sent no thank you card. They sent no apology. They knew words were cheap, and they had nothing left to offer me, not a plea, not a threat, not a thank you. They knew they had nothing I wanted. I walked out of the hospital holding my daughter, my small purse holding my keys and my future. I was financially untouchable, emotionally unbreakable, and legally free. My life was now entirely my own design. I never saw Marcus again. He sent one letter, months later, apologizing for his fear, asking for a picture of his daughter. I read the letter, acknowledging his pain, but I didn't reply. I put the letter in a box, a reminder of the boy he was, not the man I needed. Aunt Brenda saw me once, a year later at a park across the city. She was alone. The older woman stood still, watching me push Hope on a swing. Aunt Brenda didn't approach. She just watched for a long time, her eyes filled with regret and a kind of awe. She had tried to curse this child, but this child had become her family's savior. She knew she could never touch that life again. I just smiled at my daughter, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. My new life was simple, strong, and true. Hope grew, a happy, fearless little girl. She had my deep-set eyes, her own strong nose, and a smile that lit up the whole world. She was the ghost of no one. She was the reflection of pure, simple, hard-won freedom. I realized that the true victory was not in their pain, but in my peace. I had refused to be the scapegoat. I had refused to be defined by a whisper. I had built my own strong foundation brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. I was the architect of my own safety. I held Hope close, smelling the soft cotton of her clothes and the simple scent of the park grass. I had walked through fire, alone, and came out clean on the other side. The whisper was gone. The betrayal was just a story. The freedom was real. I looked up at the endless blue sky, thinking of the life they tried to take from me. I had not only survived, I had used their fear to build a life so strong, so beautiful, that no one could ever touch it again. My daughter was proof that sometimes, the ones who leave me, were the ones who gave me the greatest gift, the absolute strength to save myself, and in doing so, the power to save others. Thank you for watching, family. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Don't forget to subscribe and tell me your stand in the comment box. Until next time, queens, keep your crowns on.